Hi. For this mini lecture that deals with terrorism, religion, ideologies, I wanted to review a study that was published in 2015 that tries to connect the dots and explain how religion and in this study they focused on Muslim extremism, but that could in some way apply to other religions as well. And the study certainly makes the point that you could find this kind of radicals in all religions. So this study tries to explain how and why and when does someone crosses the line between being either a devout religious person or somebody who's really upset about anything, but crosses the line into active terrorism. The study talks about this concept of the radicalization puzzle, and it was published by Hafez and Mullins in 2015. Hafez and Mullins are both from the Naval Postgraduate School in the United States. They're both related to the Navy, to the military, have both academic and life experience, and they reviewed many cases of radicalization and came up with this puzzle. And that puzzle, according to them, has 4 pieces. And the pieces are grievances, networks, ideologies, and support structures. And they say that it is only when all 4 parts come together that they can radicalize somebody into terrorism. Now, how exactly those come together is not a linear process or a process that always repeats itself in the same way. There are many different ways for somebody to progress through those different parts of the same puzzle and become a terrorist. So let's start with grievances, right? We can think about group grievances, something like economic discrimination. Now, if we're talking again, where the study was done on Muslim extremism, and so they looked especially on Muslims in Europe. A lot of times Muslims in Europe are immigrants, and they seem to be experiencing levels or some levels of economic discrimination. They're not accepted in all jobs. They tend to gravitate towards specific employment opportunities. Sometimes it's a matter of language. Sometimes it's a matter of culture otherwise. But they seem to all feel this idea of economic discrimination. Again, for many Muslims in Europe, there's also the cultural difference. And from the locals, from the Germans, the Swiss, the Dutch, the English, whoever they are, they seem to also look at those newcomers, Muslims or otherwise, and see them as a cultural threat to the way that they always have been doing things, and also sometimes as a security threat. And every time there is an attack, think about the Paris attacks, the London train bombings, the Spain train bombings, the Madrid train bombings. Every time you see these attacks, that perception of a cultural and security threat coming from those groups to the locals increases. We saw kind of the same thing here in the United States post 9/11 vis-a-vis the Muslim community. Now, in addition to that specific economic stress and maybe cultural stress, many Muslims around the world have some level of political or group grievances that cross to many of them. And this is this idea that Muslims in general are experiencing humiliation by the West. And you can look at things like the support of the West, especially the United States, to Israel, or the plight of the Palestinians, more specifically. You can look at the post-invasion of Iraq in 2003 and everything that happens after that. You can look at the images that came out of the torture cells, the Abu Ghraib jail, the CIA black sites, all of those different images and stories. You can look at the general support that India gets from the West vis-a-vis Pakistan. And so there are those kind of general grievances that many Muslims can look at and say, well, the West is against us. There is a humiliation of Muslims all around the world against the West, from the West, I'm sorry. And then on the individual level, sometimes those, especially if there are immigrants that may be in an economic disadvantaged situation or feel under attack because of their religion or their culture, they're looking for a purpose. They're looking for their status as young Muslims living in Germany, for example. They're looking to have some kind of meaning attached to that that's above and beyond anything else. Now, those are the grievances, but we all have stuff that we don't like. We all have stuff that gets us really upset. Sometimes that may even get us to write to our representative or go protest or anything along these lines. But most of us don't cross the line and say, okay, I have a grievance, therefore I should go and use violence and attack somebody else and terrorize them until my problem is solved. And so the grievances are only one part. Another part, and it's a very important part, are the networks. If you experience grievances or if you feel that you are slighted, that could remain as an individual feeling. But if you can connect to other people that have the same feeling or the same grievances, then that gives more power and force to whatever you are arguing. And so the connection to other people, other individuals that feel the same way as I do is important and magnifies the grievances and what I'm willing to do in order to solve the problem. Now, we know that people get into networks, get into groups, into organized groups by friendships, by kinship, by being close by to where those groups are operating. Most of us are much more likely to end up radicalized, to end up in an activist group if our friends or our family is already involved in it, or if there is a center of organization right in our community or in our neighborhood. A lot of times when people experience that something is missing in their life, they might look to belonging to something. They might look to becoming part of a group. And in many times, those groups are, again, of people with similar ideas, with similar concerns. And so we are seeing the creation of those networks of grieved individuals. And they're all kind of want to work together towards their goal. This has become very popular and strong in Europe because of the legal framework, freedom of speech, and because social organizations are very, very strong in Europe. So if we look on Muslim extremism, this might have started in the mosque, but then you see those organizations operate more in the neighborhood, in the community centers. They can be found in many, many places. Now, and again, this is looking at Muslim extremism and in Europe. At the beginning, when they were organizing, they were trying to look back to their government in their origin, in the countries of origin, and to try and protest whatever those governments are doing, or try to bring about an action that may replace those governments in order to create a better reality in their home countries. But at some point, and because of events, especially post 9/11 and the reaction from the West towards Al-Qaeda and the invasion of Iraq and other things that happened, you see those same networks now turning their attention to the West and Western government. Now, what those networks are doing is that they become their own echo chambers. They become what the authors have called spirals of encapsulation. They demand commitment from their members. If you are a member of the group, you are expected sometimes to even cut ties with anybody else, but you certainly are expected to be fully dedicated to their cause, come to all the meetings, take part in whatever activities they are doing. They have events, they have intra-group bonding, they make sure that people become attached to each other in the group, and that they rely on their own sources. So they're not encouraging academic research, open, objective search for information, but instead they give the information. They feed their members their information. And because of all that, you don't see a lot of dissent. You don't see a lot of questioning within those networks. You see a lot of groupthink. You see people act kind of as a unified body towards whatever goal the leaders define for them without a lot of stopping to think. So grievances was one, and networks is the next, and then come in the ideology. And the ideology is a build-up, and it's related to the grievances, and it's related to the network. Now, Muslims in general, right, or at least those that find themselves in these groups, define the secular regimes in their home countries or in their new host countries they immigrated into, as regimes that are not good for them, for the group. And so they argue that Muslims suffer in the hands of those secular regimes. And they don't see a lot of the current, or any of the current Muslim governments as powerful enough, somebody that can stand up to the West and take care of the people, their economic needs, their cultural needs, their identity needs, all of those things that we listed before in the grievances. And so the group that relies on that ideology believes that it is in their power to take action and bring redemption, and that their redemption is not just for them individually, or not even just for their group, but in this case, it is for all good Muslims, right? They are representing something, or they believe that they are representing something. And because of that, they are willing to take extreme action. So we had the grievances, we had the networks that bring the people together and kind of solidify the grievances. And then that is all being built into ideologies. And then finally, we have those support structures. We do know that, for example, in the case of Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State, we do know of the existing of actual physical training camps in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Somalia, in other countries. And we do know, and the research shows very clearly, that people who traveled and were trained in those locations are very, very likely to then fully participate in actual terrorism. And so this is the issue that we have now with foreign fighters, especially those that traveled into Syria to fight with the Islamic State. And now what happens when they want to come back to their home countries? Because they are trained and they are indoctrinated and they believe in the ideology and they are ready for action. Now, kind of a second step from traveling into those training camps is the use of the internet and social media. Those are not replacement for the traditional models of face-to-face recruitment and training, but they are a key part of it, and also they may radicalize individuals even without the proximity and the kinship into the networks. And so once again, if we go back to the puzzle, right? Then if you put all of those pieces together, this is how you get, in this case, in the case of this specific study, this is how you get those the radicalization of Muslim extremism that are willing to use terrorism. But like I said at the beginning, this same model can be used for other religions